This is the gospel of Jesus Christ according to St. Matthew, the 25th chapter. Jesus said to his disciples, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' Then the one who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not gather seed. So I was afraid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours.' But his master replied, 'You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.' This is the gospel of our Lord." So I think it is an interesting example of the way language progresses over time. The metaphorical significance of the talents is much closer to our understanding of that word talent than its literal meaning in the parable. A talent at the time was a sum of money. It was a large sum of money. Even 1 talent was over 15 years' salary for an average laborer. Our modern usage of that word didn't gain prominence in English until about the 13th century. And this parable had a hand in that development because that modern understanding of the word is much closer to what Jesus was talking about. And Jesus talked about money a lot, but that's not the point in this case. And he's not talking about the return or the payoff for the investment either. He's talking about the gifts and skills God has given each of us and having the courage to use them. Just like the sum of money in the parable, these metaphorical talents of ours are abundant beyond belief. But just like the man entrusted with the 1 talent, many of us have been taught that failure is the worst possible outcome, to be avoided at all costs, even if it means you don't use it at all or even try. That idea is baked into our common usage of that word, failure. It's baked into the way we label any unexpected outcome of our efforts as failure. The master in the parable doesn't even seem to acknowledge the existence of the concept. I entrusted a talent to you. You should have used it. There's no acknowledgement at all that investment entails the risk. We all know it does. And I think that's because the outcome, that's not the point Jesus is making. Now, it's pure speculation here, but I would guess that we could add another character into this parable. One who did go out and invest the entire sum entrusted to him and lost it all. And I bet he would still be invited into the joy of the master. Because it's the use of the gift and not the result that is the source of that joy. Now, it's not always going to work out the way we planned, that using of the gifts. That's a plain and simple truth. And you can call that failure if you want to, but that word has such a harsh connotation that if we're going to use it, we should probably let its meaning evolve and progress. It would be a benefit for all of us to learn to approach the idea of an unplanned, unexpected, or even undesirable result with less fear. That's something that almost everyone who does achieve results that we would call desirable has in common. They're not hiding from failure as a cruel master. They are approaching it with bold confidence, showing their gifts. Google, in its moonshot factory, tries to embrace that idea by actually offering bonuses to teams that pursue a project to complete failure. The idea is twofold. Bringing a project to failure, well, that has benefits and lessons in and of itself for future projects, but striving to achieve ideas so big that they have to fail pushes up against the boundaries of what we consider possible with such persistence that those boundaries themselves have to move and the impossible is achieved. If you're not of the Google generation, that same idea and way of thinking was embraced by Bell Labs or NASA in its literal shot at the moon. But if you're not a fan of technology advances, the same idea was put forward in a Nike commercial that aired in the mid-90s that featured Michael Jordan, who was arguably the greatest basketball player of all time in those days. And the footage, though, was not of his trademark flight from the foul line, not even of him in celebration. It was of him missing shots. And his voice narrated it with statistics like how many times he was entrusted with the game-winning shot and didn't make it. The punchline at the end was when he said, "I have failed more times than anyone I know, and that is why I succeed." So even if we hold to our traditional understanding of those words, you can't have success without risking failure. If you are unable or unwilling to risk failure, if we let our fear of failure become such a harsh master that we would rather bury the gifts we have been given than risk its scorn, then along with that we will have buried any hopes we have at joy. The risk is needed. But let's also be honest, that risk is a lot easier to take when you've got 5 talents than when you've only got 1. It's real easy to understand how a NASA engineer or a Hall of Fame shooting guard is willing to risk the seemingly foolish idea or take the clutch 3-pointer. They have so many gifts and talents. They've achieved so much success. I mean, the engineer is still going to be considered the smartest person in most rooms regardless. And Jordan is still going to be the guy they try and get the ball to the next time the game is on the line. I don't think those people even understand what it's like for the rest of us holding our one precious talent, wondering what happens if we lose it, what happens if we fail, what happens to us then. Those thoughts are frightening. We can be honest about that. They are a harsh master of the world in which we live. They are enough to convince us to cover and bury and protect our gifts. See, I personally, at least, I understand the feelings of the worthless slave in this parable far more than I do the confidence of the good and trustworthy servants. And I don't think I'm alone in that. That's why I think it's important for us to be mindful about how we use these words, success and failure, even talents and what they mean. That's why I think it's important to understand the difference between the talents that have been entrusted to us and the reward that is the joy of the master. So first off, let's be clear, a mistake is not failure. An unexpected result is not failure. Burying your gifts, not using them, that's failure. And getting more gifts and talents, that's not success. Joy is success. Peace is success. Love is success. The fruits of the Spirit listed in Galatians are success. See, too much of what we call success in this world are really just talents entrusted to us, meant to be used, even risked losing. See, we think of a rich or a powerful person, or in the church, we think of a large congregation with a nice new building and dozens of thriving programmatic ministries, and we call that success. It's not. Oh, those things are nice to have. It's an honor to have them entrusted to us, but they're gifts, they are talents, no different than intelligence or creativity or attentiveness. Their purpose is just to be used. The goal isn't to acquire them. But that's easier said by those who seem to have acquired so much. No, it is. So, if you, like many of us, find yourself today feeling as if you only have your one little talent that you need to guard so that you don't waste it, so you don't lose it, let me remind you that in the parable, even the one talent is a ridiculously abundant sum. And that's not just true in the parable. It's a fact of the world in which we live. I'll tell you, I've never met an unamazing person. Everyone I have ever come across, everyone I know, when you get to know them, they are mind-bogglingly gifted in some unique and individual way. And the same is true when we come together in houses of worship on a congregational level. The kinds of churches I serve may not have youth missions that fly on planes to foreign countries, or an advocacy seat in Washington, D.C. And we're able to support those things with financial contributions when we can. But more importantly, there are people in these pews who know one another's stories intimately. They listen to each other and pray for each other. They're connected, and that is a talent. That is a gift. It's a gift that the larger institutions don't always have, at least not in the same way. But I admit, in the middle of a pandemic, it's difficult to figure out how to use it. It's difficult to find the bankers to invest that talent in. And that's okay. It's okay to struggle with figuring out how to use it. We don't need to run off at once like the guy with the 5 talents, confidently aware of exactly what we're going to do with them. We can hold on to it, just grateful to have it. Just don't bury it. Just don't bury the talent. Be ready. Be ready, because the time will come to use it, and you'll know how, and you'll know when. I can't promise you that if you do, you'll receive more talents in return. Maybe we will. God, like the master in the parable, has been known to do such things, but it's not guaranteed. What I can promise you is that you will not fail. You cannot fail. Because using the gift in and of itself is success. Using the gift is its purpose. That's why it was given to you, and the payoff, the return for that investment is guaranteed every bit as much as the master in the parable seemed to assume that the interest would have to come. It couldn't be lost. There was no risk. And the payoff is joy. That's guaranteed. And so I find great joy in knowing people and serving congregations that are actively struggling with exactly what do we do with these talents, and aren't burying them. I am eagerly awaiting examples of how they are used. And I look forward each day to seeing them in action. Thanks be to God for those talents and that opportunity. Amen.